Our landings have failed and I have withdrawn the troops. My decision to attack at this time was based on the best information available. The troops, the air, and the navy did all that bravery could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone. Dwight D. Eisenhower. Those words were written on a scrap of paper that Eisenhower put into his pocket right after he gave the go on D-Day. He forgot about it, and the paper was later found by an aide. These words symbolize the result that came oh so close to happening on D-Day. Failure. Operation Overlord, more commonly known as D-Day, was the Allied invasion of northern France on June 6, 1944. It opened up a true second front in World War II. The success of Operation Overlord helped end the war in Europe quicker and save thousands if not millions of lives. What could have caused Operation Overlord to fail? About everything. The main factor on the invasion day was the weather. June 1944 had begun with beautiful weather, but after a few days storms rose up and rocked the English Channel. D-Day was actually postponed from June 5th to June 6th, because it was impossible to land in the current conditions. On June 6, 1944, Group Captain J. M. Stagg, a moody Scot, told Eisenhower he thought the weather would stay clear for most of the day. It was more of a hunch than anything, but it was correct. If Eisenhower had called off the invasion that day, he would have to wait 2 weeks for the right high tide positions that would allow troops to land safely. If the invasion could not land then, the Allies would have to wait another year for proper landing conditions. 2 weeks after June 6, 1944, a humongous storm hit the English Channel and destroyed one of the Mulberry Docks at Normandy. If the weather hadn't cooperated for those precious 24 hours, anything could have happened. Operation Fortitude, which consisted of many sub-operations, was the deception and protection of Operation Overlord. The Allied intelligence agencies convinced the Germans that the invasion would come at the Pas de Calais, or in Norway. To do this was one of the toughest jobs of the war. They had to create 2 fake armies, make the media broadcast these fake armies where German intelligence could see them, and make sure nothing went wrong. Also, all 50 German spies in Britain were turned, and became double agents working for the Allied powers. Capturing and flipping 50 spies seems like quite a task to me. If any hint that the Allies were amassing a force to strike at Normandy was seen by the Germans, they would increase the strength there by tenfold. Who knows how many casualties would occur then? The third factor that determined the fate of D-Day was plain, dumb luck. First, the Germans did not think the Allies would attack at high tide. Because of this, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was in Germany with his family. Although no German commander has the power to act without Hitler's orders, Rommel had disobeyed Hitler before in order to save thousands of German lives and military equipment. Secondly, Hitler had taken sleeping pills the night before and had been told not to be disturbed until noon. By that time, the invasion was already 12 hours in progress. After he was awake, he did not make any decisions quickly, as he thought this wasn't the real invasion. If he had moved the panzer divisions in, the unarmored troops might not have been able to resist a counterattack. Back at the beaches, all the troops scheduled to land at Utah Beach landed off course to the southeast of the designated location. But fortunately, the position was barely fortified, and the troops ignored the bad conditions, punching inland and greeting many airborne troops before the day was over. Luck was on the side of the Allies that day. Maybe karma was coming back to bite the Nazis. Maybe not. But it saved the Allies, no less. If D-Day had failed, the consequences would be, to say the least, extremely severe. If none of the landing forces could establish a beachhead, the troops would be pushed back into the sea. Most would be slaughtered. A few might be able to be evacuated. The troops would return to Britain, where along with 1.3 million other soldiers, they would wait for new orders. The morale would be lower than ever before. Thousands more would be dead, and the Allies would be in a very confused state. The most likely solution would be sending troops to Italy and Sicily to prepare for Operation Dragoon, which struck at the soft underbelly of France. However, since Hitler was not worried about his Reich in the south, he would be able to put up heavy resistance during the push north, causing many more casualties. Meanwhile, troops would still be in England, draining the resources from the country. President Roosevelt would most likely not win the next election coming up in November, and the new regime would take place, along with a new Prime Minister in Britain. As Winston Churchill risked everything on this operation, and would have to step down if it failed. If another operation were to take place in northern France, it would have to be in a less suitable place. At the end of the day, the new governments in the United States and Britain would be confused and inexperienced, and the amount of dead soldiers would be past drastic. things would not be good. After a failed D-Day invasion, fate would fall into the Russians' hands. The first possibility would be that Hitler would divert troops recently defending his western flank to the Russian front and battle the Russians into a bloody stalemate, where the Russians and Germans might sign another non-aggression pact like the one in 1940. This would then allow Hitler to divert all his troops to Italy and possibly to an invasion of Britain. These results would be bad for everybody. The second possibility is a completely communist Europe. If the Russians battled through the full extent of the German army and captured Berlin, nothing would stop them from taking the rest of Europe. The Cold War would be completely different, probably more deadly. Again, an invasion of Britain would be possible, this time by communist Russia. All in all, I think a completely communist Europe is a scary thing to imagine. Fortunately, all experts agree that Nazi Germany could not defeat all the Allied powers and win World War II. An invasion of the United States would be impossible because of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. However, I find this good news not quite satisfying enough against the bad news of a German-Russian non-aggression pact or a communist Europe. Over 60 million people died during World War II. If D-Day failed, you can easily tack on a few more million, maybe even tens of millions more. The Allied German and Russian armies would continue to lose troops, but the worst thing is imagining a Holocaust that lasted another year or more. Millions more innocent lives would be lost. The thought is unbearable. Thankfully, D-Day was successful and helped bring down Nazi Germany. There is no need for alternative operations with the same implications as Operation Overlord, and casualties for both Allied fronts were lowered. Operation Overlord was one of the most carefully planned operations in military history that went horribly wrong, but with much luck somehow succeeded. But what if?